This episode of Two Guys on Mobile is brought to you by Pontiflex App Leads. Go to www.appleads.com. And by Macadamian, helping companies transform ideas into compelling, market-ready products customers love. You can find them at macadamian.com. It's time for Two Guys on Mobile. Episode number 22. We're recording this live. Live enough, anyways, between Jeff and I. And it is July 10th. Sunday, July 10th. Bright and early one morning, which is Sunday morning. This is our church, the Church of Mobile. Oh, man. My name is Rob Woodbridge. Of course, you can find me at untethered.tv or at Rob Woodbridge on the Twitter. And with me, as always, Mr. Jeff Bacon.
That's right. I think we should start up the Church of Mobile for a Sunday morning viewing of this podcast.
That's right. I don't know how many people would be here worshiping in the Church of Mobile, but you can worship Jeff at Bacon on the Go, right? BaconOnTheGo.com, the Suave Hog on Twitter, and of course he's the purveyor of all things mobile at Ascension Cross Media, of course.
I prefer to get my worshiping on Twitter because it's more public that way for everybody to see it.
Worshipping on Twitter. Well, I think that's what people do. They worship their they worship their heroes on Twitter. I'm not sure that we're considered a hero. Before we get going, I want to bring on. Actually, I want to announce we've got a new sponsor for this podcast for Two Guys on Mobile. Somebody's taken I love it. So we're Macadamian, which is a local technology company here in Ottawa. They got 200 people. They've got a global footprint with offices around the world in the States and in Europe. They do development. They create successful software products and I've used these guys before as application developers for when I ran Rove. They built an SSH client for us, and it was exceptional. We knew that we had who to go to when we needed our software product. We needed burstable resources where we couldn't build it in-house, and we needed somebody that we could trust, and we relied on Macadamian. So we really love the fact that they're here. They're sponsoring my other show, the interview show on untethered.tv as well, and we just love them. Love them to death, and thankfully they've come on and sponsored us. They've taken up the gauntlet, and we are very happy to have them here. Macadamian.com. I just very thankful that we have such great sponsors for the show. So welcome, Macadamian. Thank you guys for sponsoring, and hit them up, Macadamian.com. They build great products for you. We're going to talk about this neat article that came out. I found it on Read Write Web, and then I jumped over, obviously as a good web guy does. I jumped over to where they actually had this review. It was actually an article that came out where they said that the mobile industry is now 2% of the world's GDP, and this is from an analyst called Chetan Sharma Consulting Group. And they did a phenomenal job of kind of encapsulating what was going on in the mobile space, about how big this mobile space is, and how we are, and what the impact is going to have. We might think it's large now, but it's going to be growing at such an incredible rate. So Chetan Sharma, never heard of these guys before, but they've come up with this report on essentially what is classified. I would consider it the future thinking about what the mobile industry is bringing, and so they came out with some staggering statistics, and one of those was obviously that the GDP, that mobile is now 2% of the world's GDP, and you took a look at this. What were your thoughts on it, Jeff?
I thought it was pretty impressive that someone has been able to calculate what mobile revenues overall for the world have been in some sort of realistic fashion, because it's difficult to get those kind of numbers out of carriers and the industry itself. But I think it's a realistic figure, and that some of the sub numbers that went around with that, like that there's 50 mobile companies that are going to be generating $1 billion each in revenue this year, and that 300 million out of that 1.3 billion is actually data revenues, not voice revenues.
Yeah.
And there was another chart on, unfortunately, an article that I don't have at the tip of my fingers here, showing the data revenues changing for carriers, and the cost of data revenues, and what they're actually at now. And like in the US, I think they said it was $10 a gigabyte for carriers to transmit data across their mobile networks, and that of course, they're looking for ways to reduce that cost. And that ties into this whole 1.3 billion GDP for mobile stuff, which is in that, traditionally, and most of that 1.3 billion is voice and carrying, basic mobile calls. And data is starting to creep into, well, not starting, but is becoming a significant 23% plus of that revenues at 300 million. And I think it'd be interesting to see where the next large chunk of what we classify as mobile GDP stuff comes from, which of course, as I'm sure everybody's heard that's listened to this podcast, we all think will be in a mobile payments realm.
Well, what they've said, what this report, the gist of this report is that it's, you brought up the number, it's $1.3 trillion, and that's what the net impact, the global market for mobile is $1.3 trillion. And ultimately that's about 2% of the GDP by, I think they were talking about 2015, currently. And
so I was off by only an order of 1,000 on my numbers there. Trillion to billion, billion to million.
But it's a considerable amount. Whatever we're talking about, it's a considerable amount. And one of the things that is always staggering to me about these numbers is the ability to as you said, to manage this. I think these are controlled numbers, so it's easy to measure the $1.3 trillion because of the impact. But what they're talking about is creating such an incredible amount of wealth, and this is only based on a small percentage of the world using this kind of technology, the smartphone technology. They said that 26% of the world is using smartphones or personal computers in their hip, with the U.S. kind of leading the way with about 36 or 37% smartphone penetration. And this goes in hand with Tomi Ahonen, who's talking about a mobile being a $5 trillion industry. So that's upwards of 10% of the GDP. And that is a staggering number when this will have an impact. So we're just really at the beginning of it, 20% of where we should be.
And it's not, you mentioned about smartphones there, but the majority of this 1.3 billion is not coming from smartphones, right? Like the 1.3 trillion, sorry. The 300 billion data, we can probably assume the majority of that is actually smartphone usage.
Yep.
But the other $1 trillion in there, if we're saying 26% of mobile penetration of smartphones, that means 74% of that $1 billion potentially is made by non-smartphone usage, which still puts non-smartphone usage at, whatever that is, 3/4 of a trillion, and smartphone usage at 600 billion. So, we're getting pretty close, and obviously the data revenues on smartphones are much higher per user than they are on traditional phones, but I think it still shows that while we focus a lot here and in some of the leading edge mobile stuff on the smartphone usage, because that is typically where the innovation is happening, that the revenues for mobile phones in general, you got half the revenues plus coming from non-smartphone usage. And that's, many areas of the world that don't have high smartphone penetration, but still have mobile networks that are still using phones that we were using 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, I certainly, the other side of this is, as you said, the feature phones. SMS is a massive revenue generator, and because it's pervasive, because there's so many, the volume of SMS has not gone down. In fact, it's gone up as a result, even though the penetration of smartphones or computers in your pocket have accelerated, shall we say. SMS is still a dominant way of communicating in the developing nations, and it's got to play a huge part into this revenue. But you start to think about what was very clear about this report was that they highlight the same things that we've been talking about, the far-reaching impact that mobile is going to have on not just voice, not just traditional data and communications and text. It's more like how is it going to have how is it going to reach its hand into day-to-day business, whether it's photography, which we've seen, or commerce, which is we're starting to accelerate now, or even material impact like how we interact with our homes and how we conserve energy and how we drive cars. This is one of those once-in-a-lifetime technologies that just reaches absolutely every aspect of our lives. And ultimately, the accelerant that's been put on it through the smartphones is only the beginning. Phase 1, right?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting now because when we see small slices of pies growing bigger, it's interesting to analyze them. But after a certain size, it's no longer relevant anymore. So, like when Tomi Ahonen says it's going to get to a $5 $5 trillion point, at that point, it's not about what percentage of mobile is. It's like asking right now what percentage of people are using credit cards.
Yeah.
We don't ask that anymore because it's such a high percentage, it's not relevant in terms of determining the market information. And so mobile penetration and mobile revenues and mobile GDP usage are interesting when they're 2% and 4% and 5%. But as they start creeping above that, it's too big now. Like that, the number, the $5 trillion number, like it's not relevant anymore. That number doesn't mean anything, and you have to break it down into smaller pieces to be able to find how that actually impacts people. Because people using their mobile devices to buy clothes in a store, that's not that's regular. That's not important anymore. It's like people using a credit card. We don't care.
Yeah, it's part of life.
Yeah,
and it's exactly. I mean, but what I'm saying is that ultimately, these devices that we carry, whether it's an iPhone or an Android or a RIM device or whatever it is, or Nokia device or Windows Phone 7, this is wave one of what we're considering this mobile space. We've talked about this quite a bit, and I think that this report brings it up. Is that mobile's going to lose context. That word is going to disappear because it's just going to be de facto, right? Here it is. I mean, it's computing. It's pervasive computing, always on, always connected, and the format or the form of that is going to change. It's going to move away ultimately from a smartphone and into just there. You're going to start your car, it's connected. You're going to drive by a street light, it's connected. You're going to drive into a store, you're connected. You're connected. Your watch, whatever it is, it's going to be connected. And that's part of I consider that still part of this nascent mobile industry. But when you start to think about how how this spreads out across all of these industries and becomes just as you said, a current, like electricity. You expect to turn you flip a switch, a light comes on. When you're somewhere, you're always you're going to accept the fact that within a number of years, short period of years, within 2 years, mobile, the term will disappear, and the concept of always connected will be there, and it'll just be like, I expect to be there. Right? I expect it to be there.
Absolutely. I mean, it's going to be just part of your daily life, as you said. It's going to be what people are using to access their banking, their purchases, their communications hubs. It's not going to replace a computer, like laptops and desktops and things will still be around. Tablets aren't going to replace a physical computer at a point of contact in your house, but it's going to help the transient nature of the data that people store on those computers. And that's not just through cloud computing and not just through devices having gigabytes and gigabytes of storage on them now. Like my mobile phone now has like a few hundred times the amount of data storage on it than my computer did just 10 years ago.
Yep.
So, and I'm carrying it around with me. And that's not going to change. The price of memory is going down. Therefore, they'll still pack more memory into your device, and you'll still have basically a higher amount of your data in a cloud, but you'll have it offline stored, and you just have access to it anywhere. So as you walk around with your mobile device, you're just walking around with your data. And it's instead of having a smart chip on your Visa card in your wallet that is security there, you're going to have your mobile phone, which has the same sort of protections for you on your personal information and what you do with it. And just like people pay attention to where their wallet is, and every time, the classic guy gets up and pats the pockets for keys, wallet, and then walks away because you don't want to forget those things. Now it's keys, phone, wallet. Everyone just like automatically get up, do I have my keys, wallet, phone? Yes. And that wallet one is the one that eventually we think is going to be replaced by the mobile phone, even though there's just a transition going on right now.
Yeah, and I think, spot on with that. And the big opportunities are going to lie when in this report, what they talk about, what Chetan Sharma talks about, is the fact that becoming a trusted concierge or a trusted advisor to an average person, to you or I, to the individual, is going to make such a big difference. There's huge opportunities to do this, where preferences are stored. There's nothing more personal than your your mobile device, and when you start to get into that level, it should be seamless, right? I should be able to walk into a store and ultimately all my preferences are there, stored somewhere outside. But I bring my preference with me, and I bring my history with me into those areas, and that's really where you start to see the beauty of pervasive and connected devices and always on computing, because all my preferences are there. I shouldn't have to pull out cards. I should just be able to add it. I should, my reward card should just be able to be credited or debited appropriately. And the same thing with payment. We're just at the beginning. And as much as we love our phones, we're going to realize one day very soon, that these devices are clunky, that it's cumbersome, right? We started with carrying these things around because we decided that, we needed a better way to store contact information, right? That was the big, back in the Palm days, it was a $500 contact management. And then it evolved, and then what did we do? We took the contact management and jammed a phone in there in the same form factor. Like, they weren't meant to be together. A contact manager and a phone were never meant to be together. And what we've seen is evolution, not revolutionary steps. And it's the same thing what we're trying to do right now when it comes to this beautiful industry that we love so much, is that now what we're trying to do is we're trying to jam it all into a phone. And that form factor, doesn't work for all of this stuff. I believe in the e-wallet. I don't think that the phone is the best way to carry the e-wallet, but it's the best thing that we've got right now. It's a transient thing in nature. And one of the things that we notice is that 100 years ago, the phone was pretty much invented. 150 years ago, the phone was invented, right? This infrastructure with cables and phone poles and telephone poles, and dial tone, and it started with operators and voicemail and all that kind of stuff. And there was another report that just came out on Read Write Web that I read as well, that by 2018, I love these dates, but that only 6% of North American population will actually have a home phone, right? And when you start to see shifts like that, it shows you how quickly these industries can fall, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a shift in the way we're looking at things, because it's not really an industry that's falling; it's an industry that's evolving. Because the companies that are losing subscribers on the PTSN, the plain telephone switch network, they are the mobile companies providing you mobile phone service. So they have more competitors in that space, because the cost of providing mobile service is towers, not digging up trenches to put fiber lines down in for backend. So that while the cost is high to get into mobile, it's far less than it is to provide cable to everybody's house to get into the old television network, or the old telephone network. But
the challenge you've got with the wireless and mobile is spectrum. You've got to buy the spectrum, and there's limited spectrum that you can buy, and it's very expensive. But maybe not as expensive as putting infrastructure down, but it's very expensive.
It's expensive to buy the spectrum because of the market reality for it, not because of the actual cost of the spectrum itself.
No, it's scarce.
It's a scarcity thing, right? So it's because you have 5 different companies trying to buy more spectrum. It's not because you have to pay 5 million people to dig up roads and dig up ditches and put the cable lines down and produce the physical cable. As soon as you move things out of a physical context into the radio spectrum context, it's just all about competition, which means you do have a price cap on it, because you can only pay as much for that as revenue you can generate through using that spectrum in the future. Whereas when you're putting down physical lines and you're trying to do a standard hard connection to someone's house, it costs you a fixed amount at least. You can't go below that. Even if there's no competition, there's no way it can cost you less than that. And so as we transition from the old phones over into mobile, and we transition mobile in our lives, just like telephones have changed forms, you say mobile is going to change forms as well. And I'm not sure. Right now, I do think actually that the phones we have are one of the best ways to carry around that information with us. I think they could have a little bit more intuitive security on it. Like, how many years have fingerprint scanners been around that you could just be holding your device and have wherever your finger normally is, have that scanner on it so it knows it's you? How long have we had facial recognition technology that actually works really well so that the camera on the front of it anyways can just know that it's you or not you and do that? But security aside, until we evolve to something that is far more sci-fi than traditional stuff now, in which you have something embedded in you, or you're wearing glasses with heads-up displays or things on them, I do think that the mobile form factor, or the approximate mobile form factor, which really hasn't changed since the first mobile phones, it's got a device that you carry. The plastics have changed a bit. There's a radio, there's a screen on it. They've changed those around, but I mean, the general, like, what are you holding in your hand has just become more technically advanced, but it's the same kind of thing. As you said, Palm Pilot and an iPhone right now, if you put them beside each other to somebody 100 years ago, they'd say they look the same. It's only because we've seen the micro evolutions of those devices that we think they look a lot different.
So our kids won't see, what's amazing by this is that our kids won't see phone booths. They won't understand what a phone booth is, right? And I think that their kids won't understand what a newspaper is, or what a television set is. And as things evolve like this, you've got to look at a report like this. You can either look at it as evolutionary, like, look, it's a natural step, gradual from the bottom up, or you can look at it from where we're going and then scale back and look at what's going on here. And with device evolution, this is where we have to look at. You have to kind of throw away what we've got and think about what it should be. Don't try to jam, credit cards in here and all this kind of stuff into this thing. But what should that look like that accommodates all of those things, right? And I think what was so unique about the iPhone and why it's kind of spawned, it was like the day one of mobile for a lot of people, was the fact that this wasn't like what RIM did. This wasn't like what Palm did. We just jam these two together, right? And then just kind of hope inside of this constrained environment. So you can't jam all of these things together and expect people to feel comfortable with using it. And I think that we're seeing that evolution. And I'm hoping that somebody out there is thinking, okay, what's that next step? Whether it's tablets or not, who knows? But you've got to put the effort into thinking about where we're going and work backwards from there. And that's where I think that this is the perfect mechanism now. But there's a huge opportunity with cloud storage, dumb terminals. But how does all this play out? This is what's so great about what we're doing right now. It's like we're in the plasma stage of life, right? It's like we're injecting stuff and we're hoping that something arrives. But I don't believe we're there. We're nowhere near where we're going to be when where we're walking around with embedded chips and we don't even have to think about anything other than walking into a store and my prefs are layered and then everything changes, right? It's like, well, you like blue, so everything's blue, right?
That's exactly that. Your personal preferences that you're walking around with and what you like and how you like to interact with things. That's going to tie into the next story that we're going to do really well, and we'll follow back on this, which is then when you have all that stuff with you, when we talk about the mobile economy, we talk about $1.3 trillion in GDP on it, and as that increases, some of that GDP is going to be just basically processing payments for non-mobile stuff, whether it's buying clothes, for example, and walking into a clothes store and not having to walk around Sears for an hour trying to find what you're looking for and dig through this like rack of 5 million shirts to find the shirt that you want, because they're organized intelligently in one form, but you still kind of have to go through everything because the store doesn't know that you don't like orange shirts. Mm-hmm. And because they're going to have thousands of people coming through, and some people will like orange shirts and they won't like the blue shirts, which obviously I like since I tend to wear them on the show.
You are Mr. Blue.
Exactly. But when you walk into those stores and you have that information with you, the stores with like smart shelving and smart racks can have those racks change and customize what they're showing to you, like you've seen in sci-fi movies before, where someone walks in and punches in blue and the rack goes and the blue shirts come out. Like you can do that. Like there's no reason you couldn't do that right now. And just hang the shirts up with their little tag on them, saying their descriptions on them, and then you go into the rack and you say, I want shirts like this, and it brings those shirts out. Like they could do that. It's just that the cost of implementing that right now versus the number of people that could take advantage of it is not worth it.
Well, it's definitely, I totally agree with that. A few of the other things that were really cool about this thing, they went deep into market penetration, OS penetration, brand penetration. He also talked about the tablet market. I don't know if that's a market yet. I really don't think so. I saw this great article, or this terrible article, on a European blog that was posted everywhere, and I was going to write a rebuttal, but I didn't think that I'd have to. That said, hey, if other tablet makers want to compete with Apple, you got to lower the price. And people are thinking this, and if people are out there thinking this, that listen, in order to compete, and they talk about it, he talks about it in here as well, that you've got to manage distribution, performance, brand, and ecosystem, and price, but price is only one of the five, right? This article that I read said that there's a median price, there's an acceptable price for tablets of $299, and if you got to get to that threshold, and that doesn't explain why Apple at $499 minimum is dominating the market. I think manufacturers to drop the price to $299, making it a commodity, isn't isn't the right approach. And according to this, it's a little bit of both. It's as much, it's almost, price isn't as big a determinant, according to this report, as performance, brand, the ecosystem. You know, I disagree with, they rated a little bit low, but distribution as well. Price is only one of 5 pegs here, and this is very important. If you're going to drop the price, you also have to have the ecosystem and the performance and the brand and the distribution to be able to make sure that you actually get your device out and into the market. And nobody's done this right. Maybe
yeah, that's the point, right? That's the point of the fact that price right now is what people have that they can control. You can't directly control your brand response. You can make indirect efforts to change the way people perceive your brand. Apple got there first. Apple got the high end of the brand on it.
Yep.
And right now, you have to convince people why they should buy yours instead of buying an iPad. And if you don't have iTunes of your own to produce all that stuff, if you don't have the brand recognition, if you don't have the cachet, what you do have total control over is your price.
Yep.
And there is a price point at $299, or $300, under which the impulse purchase and the choice to make a purchase for consumers changes. And you can see that with video game consoles over history. They always strive to hit that $300 price point because they knew that as soon as you're at $300, that's a lot easier decision for whatever reason for people to make, whether it's some percentage of average disposable income that $300 equals. When you hit that $300 price point, you can sell a lot. If you're over $300, you have trouble because people are like, I'm not sure if it's worth more than $300 for it. So I do think that that is a valid price point, and that what you have to do is say, just like Microsoft did with Xboxes, we are not trying to make money on our console. We are trying to make money on providing services and providing licenses to put content onto our console.
Yep.
And over time, our production costs will drop so we can make money on the console. You know, Nintendo has the opposite view. It's build the cheapest console we possibly can and make our money on the console. And Sony is on the other side, which is build the most expensive console we can and know we're never going to make money on it for the lifetime of our console. But Apple is in the case where they could put a higher price point on it than would typically actually happen based on making basic profit margins on top of their production costs, because they have the brand to add to it and they had the services to go with as well, and they didn't have competition. So if you're going to come into the market, I think there is a great spot there for someone to say, look, I have all the same services and I'm at your price point where you can purchase it. But you have to have all that stuff in place, as you say, before that $300 price point actually, in the long term, makes sense for you. Even though in the short term, I think you could move a number of tablets at that price point. Just like when you had netbooks come in place, the price points were a driving factor for getting those in people's hands.
Yeah, but netbooks was a transient. I know you carry a netbook, and you know, my mother has a netbook, and she doesn't have an iPad. You don't have an iPad. You don't have a tablet, and it serves a need. But it was yeah, you do. You have a playbook. You don't have a tablet.
Oh, come on, come on.
But you know, one of the things that this brought out was that everybody was focusing on the performance of the tablets. And you know, it's skewed towards performance, and it's not skewed towards anything else. It kind of, the ecosystem is not, according to a lot of these people, is not as important. Apple has that ecosystem, and that's what's driving this right now. That's why I don't even believe that there's a tablet market right now. There's an iPad market, not a tablet market. And to compete against the iPad market right now by reducing your price and not going out and building you know, that next level, a competitive ecosystem, and you know, performance is important, but it's not the be all and end all. I don't care what kind of, if it's a Sandy Bridge processor in my iPad or not. I don't give a shit. What I care about is the fact that when I get in there, the experience is visceral, that I can actually do some stuff with it. I can play Tiny Tower, and I can stream my videos, and I can do this all seamlessly from the device.
But those are not mutually exclusive, though. Like,
no, I know.
Selling tablets and having the ecosystem are not mutually exclusive, because you get the chicken and the egg scenario of, as developers saying, why am I producing content so
that's
you
what
can
I'm
develop
saying,
an ecosystem without devices?
Yeah, but you know what? Apple had to start somewhere, and what did they do? I mean, consistency. They built on one iOS, or one operating system. They allowed you to be able to, you know, when the iPad launched, it was a kludgy experience, but you could 2x your app and still have it, you know, have an ecosystem built into it. So, you know, it's an evolution, and there will be a tablet industry. What it looks like, I don't know, but to go out there and you know, I agree with their summary here is that Apple's not going to lose their dominance in the iPad market for quite some time now, until somebody else builds all of those things up exclusively. The ecosystem, the performance, the brand, the distribution, all of those things, and the price is maybe one of the levers, but you got to play with all five of them in order to be able to compete in this market. And right now, nobody's playing with any of them.
Well, right? I mean, you say a couple of things. You say there isn't a tablet market, there's an iPad market.
Yep.
And then you say that people aren't going to be able to compete in the iPad market. But that's the point, is that they have to generate a tablet market for it.
Right.
And I think that by the end of the first quarter of next year, we'll be looking at the tablet market a little differently, because there hasn't been a Christmas cycle yet with tablets on the market. There's been a Christmas cycle with an iPad on the market. And you need that holiday 1 year for people to have 6 different tablets on the market plus the iPad to see what the penetration is like.
Yep.
If you have the Samsung tablet, is a great tablet. Zoom, not so good, but they did manage to sell 250,000 plus of those tablets in the first half of this year. BlackBerry, by the time Christmas comes around, hopefully, will have enough software updates to their tablet to address the major issues that people are talking about on it. And so after that period, after you have a real time where there's competition in the market, because I agree right now, there isn't real great competition for the iPad. But Apple started with having an ecosystem. They didn't have to build an ecosystem. They just took the iPhone ecosystem and put an iPad on top of it. So they didn't have to build that. Other tablet manufacturers can use price and can use this holiday season that if they say, you know what, we know people think tablets are a hot thing and people are going to want tablets. And if we provide an option that has functionality equivalent to what the iPad has, forget about the ecosystem on the side for a sec, and it's half the price, there's going to be a lot of people that say, well, I know that my friend or my daughter or my son wants an iPad, but I can get this for half the price, so I can actually afford to get that for them. And you might get a huge growth spurt in Android tablets coming out, and then developers will say, when developers see the number of Android tablets sold, that becomes a market that they can dive into. If I was told right now that over Christmas, there will be, between now and the end of Christmas, that there would be between 5 and 10 million Android tablets sold, like, that's great. I'll develop tablet software for Android. I'll get on it right now, because that's plenty of people for me to make money on. But right now, all you've heard is 250,000 Zooms. You haven't really heard that much about the Galaxy Tab 2. The Playbook has, whatever, they've shipped 500,000 of them, but it's still tepid response for people on that. So there's hard to generate a market when all the developers are saying, show me the number of tablets you've sold and I'll start making content for it. I'll invest in it. So I do think that price can be used as that kind of a weapon to say, I can either create an iTunes myself or somebody else will create it for me, as long as I have enough tablets on the market.
Well, and that's an interesting thing, is that with Android, that's ultimately what's going to happen, and that's what Amazon's doing, right? So for them to curate they're doing it so well. We both agree on this, is that what Amazon's doing by curating their own app store for the Android marketplace, and then the rumors that are swirling around that they're going to actually release an Android tablet, an Android-based tablet. Guess what? That's essentially what Apple did with the iOS, with iTunes, is curated a great number of apps, built an entire legion of followers, and then all put it out on the tablet. And so, you're right. The market is going to be defined by some big players like that, and Amazon is going to do it, because Google's not, right? They don't know what they're doing when it comes to this kind of stuff. And Microsoft has an opportunity with their tablet for Windows 8, but who knows what's going to happen there? And ultimately, it's the curation part. It's that convincing. And it's funny that Amazon's going to do this. And you'll wait and see, because when they release their tablets around the fall or Christmas time, and have a curated environment, curated applications, I think that this is going to be pretty big, especially with what they've done with the e-readers as well.
And what you say there is exactly why I think that the company with the largest opportunity in the tablet space is Microsoft with Windows 8, because they have how many million applications are written for Windows that will run on Windows 8. So when they release a tablet with Windows 8, like they've got the apps. 200
million developers, something like that. Yeah, it's insane.
Like in theory, when they release a tablet with Windows 8, you could run iTunes on your tablet.
Yeah.
And so immediately you get all the songs and videos in iTunes right there, and they didn't do the work. Apple did the work for that, right? So I think that it'd be really interesting to look 3 years out from now, because it's going to take a while for them to get it and to get it on the market. But if they produce a tablet that runs well with Windows 8 and runs Windows 8 apps on it, like, they could basically just steal this tablet market right out from under everybody else.
Well, it's Microsoft's to win, and I think that's why they're taking their time. The rumors coming out of Microsoft is that they want to make sure that they do this exceptionally well, just like they did with Windows Phone 7. They want to make sure that whatever they're doing for Windows 8 or the next version or the tablet version is done well. And this I can appreciate from Microsoft, because they would typically not do this. And this is what we're talking about. Early on in this long conversation, I said, it's not about evolution, it's revolution. So how do you take that next leap? And it's what Apple did. It's what Amazon's doing. It's what Microsoft has an opportunity to do. It's what they did with the interface for Windows Phone 7. It's what RIM has not done. RIM has not done that yet. And that's just part of growing up as a company. And I think that now that they've had the comeuppance, hopefully they have I don't know, they have a comeuppance and they actually do this properly. So we'll include a great link to this. It's an insane, it's detailed. There's 55 slides. As you can see, each one of these pieces is a discussion unto itself. We're not going to be able to do this, or this would be a 9-hour show, a little bit shorter than it typically is. But
marginally shorter.
Marginally shorter it is. But this was, it's definitely worthwhile. Chetan Sharma Consulting Group did this, and I will include the link right up there. Go and give it a review. If you have any comments on what we've said after you've given it a review, let us know on tether@gmail.com. I want to talk about making money with your apps. And, we have 2 sponsors for the show right now, and it's great. We love these guys at Pontiflex who have created App Leads, which is a way for you to make money through sign-up ads through your applications. We want you guys as developers to be able to make some revenue so that you can build out new product. We want you to be able to do it even if you only have a paltry 10,000 or 5,000 or 1,000 people who have downloaded the products, because typically that's the average, if that, the number of applications that, or the number of times an app is downloaded. Forget about the corner cases. We're talking to you guys who are 1 to 200,000 applications that have been downloaded, and you got to make some money off of it. So how do you do it? Use Pontiflex App Leads. They're sign-up ads. They're non-intrusive. They don't take your users out of the app. It doesn't disrupt the experience of the application, whether it's a game or a business app or anything. Productivity app. It allows you actually to connect with the user, customize the ad to that user, and then allow them to sign up for something. You get their mailing list. It builds a mailing list for your next application. It just makes sense, and it keeps them all in the app, puts them back out to whatever they were doing right after they've signed up. Targeted, very, very high eCPM, sometimes up to 100 times. I did an interview with TuneMe, which is an Android-based auto-tuning application, and they were seeing 10 to 20 times their revenue from other app or through other with App Leads over other app advertising platforms. So go to appleads.com. Let them know that you heard from us this great service, and start making some money with your applications. Appleads.com. So that's it, Jeff. I think that we've exhausted not only ourselves, our knowledge. We probably exhausted our audience. Those people that are still listening, we really appreciate the fact that you've stuck through it. We're going to limit this one to one story because it was such a deep story. We don't want to make this a 9-hour podcast as we typically do. But that report from Chetan Sharma was so in depth and it covered such a broad topic that I think we've exhausted all the topics that we should be talking about in one sitting. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I think definitely we've covered that in pretty good depth and went on enough little tangents as we are wont to do to put a good discussion together. Okay,
so we will carry on this conversation. We're gonna do something on augmented reality next week for episode number 23. But until then, you can find Jeff and his musings at bacononthego.com or at the Swab Hog on Twitter. Of course, you can find me at robwoodbridge.com or untether.tv or the brand new untetheredmobile.com. Who knows what that is? You got to go check it out. You can find me at Rob Woodbridge on Twitter. And as always, we are here every week talking about the things that are important in the mobile space and through this podcast, Two Guys on Mobile.
And also this week on Thursday, I'll be in Boston at the eCoast Mobile Summit on a panel on how location-based services and social have been impacting mobile development. So if you're going to be in Boston, or if you're going to be at that show, come and say hey. Let me know you watch our podcast, and we'll go from there.
What do you get? A good appreciation and a handshake.
Bitheads is paying for a trip to Boston for me.
Nice.
That's all right. Although I'm having to jet back like first thing Friday morning so I can close my house that day. But
These are, you can't do that with a mobile, eh? You can't do that with a mobile.
That's one thing I can't do on mobile yet.
Well, you know what? There are a few things that will come up, but I don't think you'll ever be able to buy a house on mobile. But we're going to talk about some of those things, about how you can hunt for houses with augmented reality next week on episode number 23. Until then, guys, thank you for watching. Jeff, thank you again. Great insight. And we'll see you next week for episode number 23 of Two Guys on Mobile. Later.